Do you think he would be a good king then?
I think he'd be better than Aegon.
Yeah.
I don't know. So here's the difference. I think Aegon, as we see later, like power goes to his head and he just becomes stupid.
That's
Basically,
true.
he just makes stupid decisions,
Mm-hmm.
which, and then I would guess Aemond would be a bit more like ruthless.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, do you want like a stupid king or a ruthless king?
I guess that's true.
And
It's really more the court that decides, right?
The problem is though, is I think neither of them would listen to the court.
That's true.
We see Aegon not listening to that. He literally fires Otto later. This is spoilers, sorry y'all. And I just think Aemond wouldn't listen to any of them either. So
Yeah.
I think they're both terrible choices. But I don't know. In my head, I do feel like Aemond would be better because he's not betting on kids fighting, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
So to me, that would...
He's got that going for him.
Right. That's a pretty big... If I was going to be voting for a ruler...
If I had to list the pros and cons.
Right. Putting your own children in the fighting ring kind of goes against you. So
That's true. That's true.
that'd be my humble opinion.
Hi, I'm Alex.
I'm Madison.
And this is
Welcome to the Writer's Room,
where we analyze various media and tell you why it works or why it doesn't.
Today we are talking about House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 9, titled The Green Council. This is the penultimate episode of the season.
Now, we love a penultimate episode in this household, so I'm very excited to talk about it. Quick spoiler warning before we get into it. We will be talking about the show House of the Dragon, but any A Song of Ice and Fire mythos is up for spoilers. That is the original book Fire and Blood, the Game of Thrones A Fire and Ice series by George R.R. Martin, the TV show Game of Thrones, and any other possible thing you can think of. You've been warned.
Okay, summary for the episode.
Are you ready?
Oh, so ready.
3, 2, 1, Dracarys.
Immediately following the death of King Viserys, Alicent, Otto, and the small council plot to put Aegon II on the throne. If only they can find him. It now becomes a race for who can locate Aegon first. Criston Cole and Aemond for Team Alicent, or the twins Eric and Auric for Team Otto. They search all over King's Landing while Otto forcefully speaks with the lords to bend the knee to Aegon, and Alicent attempts to sway Rhaenys to her side. Racing through the most despicable parts of King's Landing, it becomes more and more clear that Aegon really is undeserving of ruling, especially to Aemond and the twin Eric. Eventually, Team Alicent is able to bring home Aegon for the win. Alicent lays out the plan to Otto of how the usurping of the throne will be handled. Larys informs her of the spy network run by the White Worm and utilized by Otto. In return for some really uncomfortable favors, Larys will take care of it. It is now time to crown Aegon, but with the help of twin Eric, Rhaenys escapes and bursts through the floors with her dragon Bailey, sparing Team Green and fleeing King's Landing.
51 seconds.
Yeah.
Very nice. I'm going to say it before we get into it.
Okay.
I don't know. This is not a bad thing necessarily. I don't know if this episode feels like a penultimate episode.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking about that a lot. So it's weird because usually, so when you have like a plot structure of like, you know, exposition, rising action, then you have a climactic moment and like falling action resolution. What Game of Thrones did a lot was their 9th episode was their climactic moment of the season.
Yeah,
and
the
then
big battle of some kind.
And it was just something big happened. The most climactic, the most intense moment happened. And then the 10th episode was sort of the like resolution of that and the setup for the next season. And so, yeah, it was kind of weird to me that this was it was just like subdued. I'm not to say it was a bad episode, but I definitely wouldn't have thought this would have been the penultimate season, the climactic, or the penultimate episode, the climactic episode of the season.
From what we've seen so far, because it doesn't, when you think of the penultimate, the big event is usually something we've been building up towards. It's the Battle of the Blackwater, it's the Battle of the Bastards, it's
the Red Wedding.
So, you know, something big where maybe it's not expected necessarily, but it's something that sort of, looking back on it, that all leads up to that moment, right? And I would argue this first season, the big climactic moment would be Viserys' death. You know, because I don't really think in my mind, we've been definitely figuring out who's going to be the king, but I don't think the question this season was who was going to be king. I think it was when all this was going to come to fruition.
Okay.
So that was just sort of in my mind as we sort of watched it, because I feel like so far, the biggest hit to me the entire series was Viserys dying. So I feel like that's a strong thing. And then the next episode, because this does sort of feel, it is building up towards the things about to happen, but it does feel like a reaction to the big event. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. Like if you told me this was the season finale, I could have believed it. If the last episode was the penultimate one and then this was the finale, I could have believed it. So I think what it is what makes a climactic moment strong and like a climactic episode strong is there's some sort of decision made and some sort of choice. It doesn't have to be like, and this isn't just like Game of Thrones that would do this. Like a lot of really strong shows. Yeah. They use like even sometimes it's the finale. A lot of times it's before the finale, building up to something. Right.
Yeah.
And I think with this is the choice was already made.
Yeah. Well, I think even the last episode, the choice, I guess, is Alicent saying, okay, Aegon needs to be king. Right. Because of the mishearing. So like you've got your choice.
Well, in 8, I would say the choice was Viserys standing up for Rhaenyra. And so that's why that feels climactic, because there was a big choice that once that happens, we're not going back from it. We can't change.
Yeah.
And so him standing up for Rhaenyra meant that his character couldn't change, right? This was what we were doing. And so it felt like it was a choice. For this one, it was from the jump. Okay, how are we putting Aegon on the throne? And the question was, who's going to win, Alicent or Otto? But not much. I was never worried for someone sweeping in and killing Rhaenyra like Otto wanted. That was sort of the only thing that hinged upon finding Aegon was how Rhaenyra's situation was handled. Yeah. And I was never worried ever that they were going to swoop in and kill Rhaenyra as fast as possible and Daemon and everyone on Team Black, because I know that we're going to have a whole civil war leading up to this. For sure. So I think that's why it felt a bit anticlimactic for what's supposed to be the most climactic moment.
Yeah. And not to say that it's bad necessarily. Like, I think the episode does a lot of good things. It takes the show where it needs to go by the end. Like, I would not consider this a bad episode. It's just when I think of the second to last episode, normally the most climactic, the most extravagant, it was different. I won't say it's bad. It was different.
It was different. I think, which I don't mind when people sort of change form. I think that's creativity is amazing. And when you make creative choices, I'm always going to love that. But I think their goal, and they kind of said this in the after episode, is supposed to be like a thriller, right? Didn't he compare it to a Hitchcock film, one of the showrunners? Yeah. And I think the difference was it was the two sides all fighting over getting Aegon. Yeah. And it wasn't me as an audience member. Not much is really going to change for me depending on whose side actually finds him first. Yeah. And so I didn't feel like there was a ton of stakes. I was just sort of along for the ride. I wasn't on the edge of my seat thinking, oh my gosh, come on, find him. It didn't matter that much to me who found him.
I think I feel the same way. Throughout the episode, there was nothing inherently terrible that I was like, oh, this episode is bad. But I remember just sort of sitting back and being like, yes, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Great. It didn't feel like a thriller. And I think
I would not have guessed that if they hadn't have said that, because there were like, I don't know, it's just there's after a climactic moment, and especially in Game of Thrones, even before a climactic moment, there's usually a sea of calm, right? There's an episode where people are just sort of walking around and talking, or after the battle they're assessing things, and this episode gives off a lot of that energy, which again like has its place in the show. Yeah. But in terms of like, if you were to tell me, oh, this is a thriller, I was not thrilled, you know?
Which I think that's a really cool idea of sort of flipping what Game of Thrones has done, because everyone is going to be comparing it to that, right? So I think that's a fun idea to be like, okay, instead of this big battle scene or instead of something gory and gross, let's flip that on its head and just make it a thriller and a chase. And I think that idea in and of itself is a great one. I just don't think it actually happened very effectively. I didn't feel that way, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to get into it and talk about like why or why not that was a good idea throughout.
So do you want to just start scene 1?
Yeah, let's go.
So we start, and now that I know that they were trying to make it a thriller, I see what they were doing with this, especially this scene. So we're just sort of got these empty shots of King's Landing. It's like dark, looks to me like it's dusk, right? Or in a bit we hear like birds chirping, like it feels like the sun is about to rise kind of thing. And we see a little boy walking through. We see some cool things, like we see the kitchens. He goes to Alicent's handmaiden, Talia, and he whispers something in her ear, presumably that
the king is dead.
Right. That Viserys has died.
For sure.
And then she relays that information to Alicent, who's like crying and visibly upset. And the first thing Alicent does is go to see Otto. Yeah. So I can see how like this idea of these dark shots and it's kind of like what's happening feels like thriller-esque, but I feel like it was this lush, sad piano music playing. And to me, that's not a thriller, right?
Yeah, and I do think it fits really well. Like I wrote this down. Loved how they kept with the like hospice monastery sort of tone that we came in. And it read a lot more to me like it was just even the like King's Landing itself is sort of feeling the loss of Viserys.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the color is gone, which by the way, this was how you do a good like nighttime shoot. The colors looked great. It was dark, but I could see everything.
Yeah.
Throughout the episode, I think the colors and the contrast of the shots were very, very well done.
Yeah, I would say if the last episode was a hospice, this was the funeral, right? I really do think that it fit that vibe. They did a good job.
And I wrote this down too, actually, because we've had 2 sort of funeral scenes. And I feel like this is the only one, if we're considering this to be like the funeral mourning, that uses a funeral in the way that I think it should be in Game of Thrones, right? Because like you said, Alicent is sad. You can see she's physically grieving, but she still immediately goes to Otto and they're plotting right off the bat, right? Because everything in the world of this show, every death, every passing, every anointment, every lordship is a political move for someone.
Yeah.
And I think that's what gave this episode, even in this calm beginning of mourning Viserys, immediate stakes,
Yeah.
Where even though it wasn't on the edge of my seat, what's going to happen, I know a plan is in motion, which kept me interested.
I agree. Alicent goes and speaks with Otto and tells him of Viserys's last like dying wish for Aegon to be king, which we know as the audience that it's a misunderstanding. So to me, this was happening. It's like that night, basically that morning of his death.
Yeah,
is sort of the timeline of things. So that's cool to see something happening right after for the next episode, especially when we've been playing with time so much.
Yeah.
And it's intercut with Talia lighting the 7 candles, right?
Yeah, it's very nice. And
yeah,
like you said, that lush piano music, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, and it just, I mean, that's kind of it. Alicent seems very upset. I mean, Otto doesn't seem happy, but he sort of takes this idea that it was Viserys' last wish and runs with it. And that gets us into the small council meeting. And we start with this really cool shot of like the ball rolling and they put it in the I don't know what you would call that, but you see what I'm saying?
The ball holder.
Yeah, exactly. And Otto is standing. I thought this was really cool. So I think this is a way you can use, one, the acting was really strong to me by the performer who plays Otto.
Yeah.
And also the blocking really helped to tell the story. So I understood what was happening. So he basically talks about how he's grieving Viserys and we hear him call him Viserys the Peaceful.
Yeah.
And he says, our friend. I thought that was nice. And he tells the council what Alicent says about him, Viserys wishing Aegon was king.
Yeah.
And then he sits down, puts his ball in the placeholder, and immediately jumps into action. And it's like night and day. He becomes a different person and starts discussing what is going to happen and the plan. And it was really cool for him to, one, be standing as if like, well, my small council session has not started yet. This is me mourning my friend, everyone. I am so sad. Poor me, poor everyone who loved Viserys. And okay, yeah, let's get started now.
Yeah.
It was crazy to see that just switch flip. And it honestly made me somewhat question all the good things I had thought about Otto before. This episode really did. Not in a bad way, but anytime, because I've always been wishy-washy on how I feel about Otto and if I think he's a good guy or a bad guy or if he really believes what he's saying. But to me, this kind of solidified it, that he is ambitious and yes, he's clever, but it does not feel like the good of the realm is the 100% reason behind what he's doing.
Because the audience doesn't realize that Otto is ready to go as soon as he starts. And then half the council is also like, yes, of course Aegon's going to be king. And even Alicent doesn't know.
Well, so here's the thing. Everyone was planning this all along without her, which means specifically Otto was planning it. Who do you think was in charge of planning that? It was Otto, absolutely. And everyone except Breezebury was about it and had planned it. So that means they kept him out too, which is kind of funny. And he's just like very upset and unhappy. He doesn't even believe it that Viserys said this. He implies that Viserys did not decide this on his own accord even, and did not die on his own accord, and he just doesn't believe it. And
for sure, which like, yeah, of course, right? Like, you're telling me the only person who heard that Aegon's going to be king is his mother, like, as his dying wit, like, of course. So it's fun just to subvert the expectations that the whole council is just like, yep, on to business, you know?
Right. And so this made me think that no matter what, basically Viserys saying that in the last episode didn't really matter. The only thing that mattered was it swayed Alicent. Yeah. They were going to do this from the beginning, whether or not Alicent was on board. Don't you agree?
Yeah, for sure.
And so that to me makes it feel a little bit less silly. I do think that last episode was strong enough that the misunderstanding didn't feel silly.
Yeah.
But with this, knowing that, yeah, it was going to happen no matter what, sort of justifies this whole prophecy thing for me, and it kind of just being a misunderstanding, because this war did not hinge on that. It just was a part of it.
Exactly, yeah. And I think this is fun because Alicent sort of gets upset and she's like, are you telling me the council's been planning for my son to ascend the throne without me? Which I think is fun for a couple reasons. One, foreshadowing later on that already like the men around her are trying to run the show. And two, when they are in charge, they're making just the worst decisions. Like right off the bat, he's like, well, guess it's time to kill Rhaenyra. And I'm like, oh my God, right? He is ready to move. And I'm like, we are already so far gone. And I think this is one of my favorite council scenes, I think, of the season so far.
I think mine too, I would say. I think it was the most clear that we were playing multiple angles and more than one thing was happening.
Yeah. I also think it's fun because they don't harp on it, but I do feel that everybody is handling Viserys' death while this is going on. Like, as much as everybody tries to go to business, it's great. Like, we get Kristen absolutely, like, slamming Beesbury's head against his ball thing and, like, kills him. And it's like, you know, he's dealing with a lot, so I get it. Like, he would just kill somebody. Well, and then the King's Guard, like, puts his cloak down. And it's just good because there's a lot of outside emotion built into the logical choices people are making.
Well, I think Kristen did that for Alicent specifically. Sure. And it just really shows, it's just another example of how he will absolutely do anything for her in a very scary way.
Yeah.
Which is cool. It adds dimension to their relationship.
Yeah.
And then, the Lord Commander's upset, and even the two of them sort of draw their blades at each other, Kristen and the Lord Commander. And then I thought this was crazy. They want to remove, the Maester's like, okay, let's remove the body.
Yeah.
His dead body. And Otto's like, no, the door's going to stay shut until we finish our business. And I was like, okay, Otto, like, this is the real you, right? Yeah. All those times, I think Otto is so good about holding his tongue. He is so good about holding his cards close to his chest, and it's like, this is who he is.
Yeah.
And it was cool because I think Alicent saw that for the first time too, very clearly. So then Alicent finally asks, well, what about Rhaenyra? And Otto basically says, like, well, we can let her bend the knee, basically. Yeah, exactly. And Alicent's like, well, you know that's not going to happen. You know Daemon's definitely not going to do that. And basically, you know they're going to die. And you're okay with it. And he's like, hey, Lord Commander, go to Dragonstone and make it quick and clean. Right? Like,
which is great because, like, the episode before, we see Rhaenyra coming back and he's so happy to see her.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know anything else about that guy except that he has a connection with Rhaenyra. So that's a great establishment and carry through to this episode.
Yes. I also thought it was really interesting because this scene made me think, so in the last episode when they were all like happy and Otto was happy and they were laughing and feasting together and dancing, and I was like, you were just pretending, weren't you, Otto? Right? Maybe you were having a good time, but he was not like, okay, we've brought these two together. Yeah.
Which is like, those are the people in charge in the show, you know? Like, they're always thinking, they're always a step ahead, they're always plotting something. Which is great. I think this was a really shining episode for Otto's character.
I agree. So then, the Lord Commander resigns. He takes off his cloak and he resigns because he will not, basically he will do that to Rhaenyra.
And they do this a lot where some person is doing an action, but they focus on another person's reaction. And as the commander leaves, you see Kristen just fighting another whole entire war inside his head of what is going on. And I think it's just really like they're really hammering down that Kristen is not okay at any time. And it's funny because it's good, but it's also like, we should check on him, you know?
Yeah, that's the thing. We really should check on Kristen Cole. He is not doing well.
Like, it is fun to hate him, but boy, does he need someone in his corner
Yeah.
who's not manipulating him. It's crazy.
It is crazy. Someone who's not as messed up as Alicent is.
Yeah, someone who's not bringing out the worst in each other.
Exactly. So then we're on to the next scene, and it's Helena, and she's literally embroidering a bug. I thought that was so funny.
I know.
I
thought this was funny because like Alicent walks in and she's like, "What happened?" And I was like, "What?" Because I figured every other time we've seen her, she's had some weird like feeble vision of the thing. I thought she'd be like, "Oh, da 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 da," and say something about like, "Oh, the king's dead" or whatever. And I just thought it was funny that she's just like, "What?" You know?
Yeah, that's true. Wait, that's a good point. But to go back, so Helena's talking a little bit before Alicent walks in.
Yeah.
And what she was saying was actually kind of smart.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't stupid.
Yeah.
I just think that's kind of funny that everyone's like, okay. Because she does kind of say things that you're like, all right sometimes.
Yeah. She's
But then,
the bug girl.
Yeah, really. She's the bug girl. That's funny. And they're looking for Aegon. Otto and Alicent walk in. He's not there. And Helena says the beast beneath the boards thing again.
No, I wrote that down too.
And what do you think that means?
I don't know. Has it happened yet? Do we know if it's happened yet?
I looked it up.
Okay.
It's Melee's coming up from the ground of the dragon pit.
I see.
Which I wish it was. If that didn't happen, if Melee's, we'll get to this.
Mm-hmm.
If that didn't happen, nothing would have changed in the story.
Mm-hmm.
So I think y'all gave her a prophecy of something that like didn't really matter.
Yeah.
I wish she was saying something maybe like about the target, because it's like dragon dreams is what this is. Like people have kind of been debating, is she a green seer? What is she?
Oh,
but it's like dragon dreams, right?
That's
like,
what I figured it was.
Yeah, it's like just a Targaryen thing specifically. Yeah. And I wish she was saying, maybe if she would have said something like, in more poetic words about, it's a misunderstanding. It's about the...
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that too, because I don't know what the normal like trajectory for a dreamer is, but I think it'd be fun if she like almost misinterprets the dreams when she's like young like this, you know? Because then she can like, you could set up something kind of obvious where it's like, I do feel like looking back on it now, that does seem kind of obvious. And it's silly that I wasn't like, oh, da da da. But she could say something like that and everybody could think, oh, obviously it's this. And then it's something else. And that does affect the plot.
Yeah.
Just like a fun way to go about. Because again, I feel like they're really not utilizing this character enough. If she's going to be like a dreamer, you know, and all she does is like talk to bugs.
So it's not in the books.
Okay.
So it doesn't affect the plot, which I don't think is a problem.
Yeah.
But I think another example of how they added something that technically isn't in the books and technically, quote, doesn't affect the plot is Viserys being sick.
Yeah, for sure.
And that to me actually
How does he die in the books?
I don't remember. I'll look it up. But that to me adds so much depth to his character and to the story. Sure. And I think that they aren't using this in a way to add depth to the story. So I wish she would have said something that was more consequential, right? Like something that actually had that mattered or merit.
Well, and I mean, the whole point of the prophecies is that nobody really listens to her. So I feel like you could do a lot and still have people not listen to her.
It could be a giant neon sign saying like something that is crazy that is going to happen or something that we know. Yeah. She could literally instead be saying like Rhaenys is going to sneak out, right? You see what I'm saying? It is obviously in like a prophetic way. Or maybe like, I don't know, something maybe about the white worm, something that actually feels, because everyone's going to ignore her because everyone's like, oh, silly Helena. So she could literally be saying exactly what's happening. And that feels more fun for the audience. Yeah. Because I don't know. I also didn't get that the dragon went up. I thought she went through the wall. But apparently Melee's went up.
That's what it definitely looked like.
And that's what it meant, is like she was beneath the board, so she went up. And I just didn't get that. I
guess it's also just like all I saw was stone.
Right.
You know? But whatever.
Yeah, that's exactly. So then Aemond also walks into the scene. I thought this was a good scene, or a good episode for Aemond as well.
I agree.
I think he had a lot of really cool character moments, and we haven't really seen this actor very much. And I think this is a really, really cool character. So him kind of watching things and taking things in a lot was it was nice in this episode. So then we get to Otto and one of the twins, which twin Auric, I think, is the one who is Aegon's guard.
Auric for Team Aegon.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think he is Aegon's guard.
Yes.
So Otto's talking to Auric about how Aegon's missing and like you need to find him, take only your brother and that kind of thing. Bring him to me alone. And that's really it. There's more piano music playing and
solidifying again that like Otto is moving, he's being shady.
Well, and he's just on a team for his own. He doesn't really care to include Alicent, knowing that what she wants basically. Yeah. Which is because he's specifically saying, don't bring him to Alicent in this moment.
Mm-hmm. He follows orders, showing that like he is pretty loyal, which is fun. They also establish, I don't know if we knew this before, but it does establish that he was like Aegon's personal guard.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yes.
So when the two of them go looking and he does know all this extra information, it's like warranted, which is cool.
I agree. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So then Rhaenys is locked in her room and she sees all these servants being imprisoned. Mm-hmm. And Larys is there watching and that's kind of it. It's just a small scene.
Yeah. At this point, the music does shift. We keep the piano, but it becomes this really like moving, like I put down it sounds plotting because like scheming, I guess they're trying to evoke the sort of thriller. I still think it's a little too calming to really be a thriller, but I think it does like have a moving energy to it that I really liked. And sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say I feel like the chosen instrument for like a thriller isn't piano. Am I wrong? Would it be like strings, right?
I mean, I think it depends. I think changing the instrument for this show when it's so heavily already strings is a really good idea. But again, I think it's more just this, it's too tinged with grief for me almost.
Yeah.
But what I do like about this episode as a whole is they go from this piano music that's developing throughout to scenes of completely no music. And it's almost every other is what happens. Like there's a piano scene and then nothing, and then a piano scene and then nothing. And I think that keeps the music from getting corny because it's a lot more forward than it normally is in the show, but I think it works really well because they're using it very sparingly.
And the pacing of this episode I thought was strong, and part of that does go back to just varying things. You're not bored because you're not listening to the same thing over and over again. Yeah. So that's really smart, cutting back and forth between the piano and silence like that. So then literally like a single minute later, I thought this scene was funny. Kristen walks in and immediately says exactly what happened to Alicent.
Yeah, I wrote down Kristen is simping for Alicent.
So hard. So hard. And Aemon's there too, and he tells him about Otto's plans. And Alicent basically is like, well, we got to get Aegon first, and we need him. And she says, she puts it on Kristen to do it, and she says, everything you feel for me as your queen, right? Isn't that what she says?
Something like that.
And it's just, we see they did a good job of, because spoilers, they get together, right? And they did a really good job of planting this seed and growing their relationship. Yeah. I see the trajectory. I see it start somewhere, and I see it like getting more and more with each episode. So I just think that was it's small things, but it's a good example of it. Yeah. And then Aemond insists he goes with Cole to find Aegon because Aemond knows Aegon, like how Auric knows Aegon. Yeah, which is fun. And it's in very Game of Thrones-esque pairing. I didn't know I needed an Aemond Kristen duo for this episode, but I loved it. Yeah, actually, and then we get later we get Rhaenys and Alicent together. So it was fun to see sort of these mix-up of these characters speaking with different people. So then Kristen and Aemond are looking for Aegon. They basically go to a brothel, and Aemond talks about how he's there because Aegon brought him there when he was younger. And he says like how Aegon basically said something gross about women. And Kristen goes, every woman is the image of the mother to be spoken with reverence. And I thought that was hilarious. I actually laughed.
Well, it's funny because both of these characters are so not humorous at all that just their talking to each other is so awkwardly funny. Yeah. And they've got like these different, like Kristen's like, I'm on this mission to like get with your mom, and then Aemon's like, will you listen to me like discuss why I think I should be king? Like, and they're just like, I don't know if you're getting what you need from each other in this moment.
No, that's so true. They are really funny together,
but it plays really well. Like, actually, I think it's hilarious how they set this up.
Yeah. Especially because they're both like so brooding and internal, and they both are like Aemond does want some sort of like reassurance from Kristen Cole. And
like I was literally thinking like, like, will you be my dad? You know, like,
poor Aemond.
I
Yeah,
know.
that's so true. So yeah, Aegon's not there because she says his taste is less discriminating. I didn't know what that meant. What does that mean? What is she implying?
I took it as like, because we know he has a history of like assaulting his like maids and stuff.
Yeah.
I figured, because normally the brothels are a place where you can like get your like really weird shit happening.
Okay.
So I figured it just meant he was having regular sex, but I guess we find out that is not the case.
She's implying the like fighting rings. Is that what she's saying?
I think so.
I just didn't know what she meant by.
I don't know. I feel so at this point in the show, I feel like a couple things are happening. One, I think the dialogue isn't bad necessarily, but I was like finding myself getting lost in what they were saying sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I think I don't know if this is maybe just me, but the specific words they were using, a couple times I was like, huh?
Specifically in this scene or the whole episode?
From like this scene onward, when they say things sometimes, I'm like, I think I get what you're saying, but I'm not totally sure.
And this is an example of that? Yeah. Actually, yeah. I guess I kind of agree.
And I also feel like there's like another reason this, I don't feel like encapsulates a thriller or a sort of penultimate feeling episode is a lot of scenes are more just things happening, which again isn't necessarily bad. Like I feel like all these scenes were necessary. Things did happen.
I was entertained for the most part.
But it felt a lot more like on paper, like what events happened instead of like the story of who's talking to who's believing who with things that we've like normally been having.
Yeah.
Which maybe, you know, again, I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, but it made it feel a little more surface level.
Okay.
Again, I guess.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. So then she like implies that her and Aemond slept together. Because he's like hiding his face and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, just more cause for him to be brooding.
What does he do? She's like, how you've grown. He goes,
I know, yeah.
Walks away. He's iconic.
I know. I actually really like Aemond. Also, something else, I just think this episode drew more parallels to Daemon and Aemond's character, because Daemon felt like he was the rightful heir the whole time, and Aemond feels like he's the rightful king this whole time. So that to me was just another point of
yeah. Well, and even like more so than that, like Aemond and Daemon are both like the second sons.
Exactly. Yes. And I think this just pointed that out, because never before was it clear that he was a second son, you know, because he was, yes, but Rhaenyra was always going to be queen, so it always just felt like that side of the family. So yeah, this episode really pointed that out. So then Otto was at the court with members, or he's in the throne room with members of the court. And he's discussing.
To say, he's getting real comfortable standing next to that chair.
I know. Well, he's basically saying that you need to swear your loyalties to Aegon. He's going to be king. And one of the lords tries to leave. He sort of just says, well, I'm going to go discuss with my court. And Otto says, you're not going to leave without swearing to Aegon.
The speed at which this coup happened.
It's crazy.
Admirable.
Well, Otto's just not pulling punches.
Yeah.
He basically knows that he's going to have to make bad choices, and he has absolutely no qualms with making those, basically hurting people. He has no problem doing it. Which is just shows sort of like the ruthlessness, the aggressive nature. Yeah, I think it is too, because it shows it just contrasts Alicent at least a little bit.
Yeah. And again, I feel like maybe this is more what I mean. Like things are much more simple but visual in this episode, if that makes sense. So instead of like characters sort of mentally one-upping each other, Otto's literally like, we're not leaving this room until you say you're on our side. You know?
It feels purposefully less with less depth, but they compensated for that by making it look visually more entertaining.
I agree. I don't think it's a bad choice at all, but again, like hearing them say it's a thriller, I feel like what is thrilling about a thriller is constantly like figuring out the next clue or seeing something you didn't see before. Well, and I feel those are just two conflicting ideas. I still think the scene and the episode as a whole works. It's just, I'm really boggled that they were like, it's a thriller.
Well, yeah, because usually in a thriller, there's this like, it's almost a mystery in a thriller. Like you almost are trying to figure out what's going to happen. Yeah. And where it's going to go. But there was no mystery. We know Aegon's going to be crowned. So then someone one of the lords says he's not going to bend the knee. House Fell says they're going to do the same. The lady of House Fell says they will not bend the knee. And both are taken away, which convinces... Did we get this lord's name?
I don't think so.
Okay, I don't think we did either.
Possibly at some point, but I don't remember it.
So a lord he's dressed in basically all black. Which I thought was cool because that's a visual way to tell the story of that he is truly team black by wearing all black.
Yeah.
Right. So again, this episode does things like that to sort of make up for the lack of depth in the plot. And he decides to bend the knee himself. He seemed reluctant. He does, and then he says like "Long live the king," which is good. It was very good. This acting was strong. I very much could tell what he was thinking. And Larys is just watching. So Larys is not, he understands.
Yeah, one of their classic scene is happening, cut to somebody watching the scene.
Yes. Yeah. So then the twins and Kristen Cole are looking for, and Aemond as well, are looking for Aegon. And the twins go into literally a kid's fucking fighting ring. That was wild. Wild to never see that before or hear of it or know of it. I'm thinking like how did Viserys just let that happen?
I'm sure he didn't know about it.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure you're right. I would
because they say later, the White Worm talks about like they bribed the King's Guard and stuff. Yeah. I'm sure Otto just didn't let Viserys know, or it just didn't care. Viserys was reading books or whatever.
Right. Okay. I'm like, how did you film this with these kids?
Yeah.
Right?
No, it's good. Yeah. And we find out like Aegon has what is believed to be like multiple like bastard children in the ring.
Yeah. And I'm like, are you implying that he put them there, or that, because at first I was like, oh, that's terrible. Like he takes his bastards and like bets on them and puts them in the right. That's what I thought.
It's crazy. I feel like anywhere else this would be like a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of like, well, he's not here. Next.
Yeah, he's kind of sucks, but no. But then I was wondering if it was implying, this is crazy to me if this is what it's implying though, that he goes there to like see his kids. There's no way that's what I thought for a second though, but that is wild. Could you imagine?
At this point, I don't think so.
So then he is going there because he's like putting his bastards in this fighting ring.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if he's like going there to like put them up to be fighter. Like I think he's just getting rid of his children in some way.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's another one. It's just like this big thing happened and you're like, huh?
Yeah. But so then we cut to Aemond is mad that Aegon doesn't want the throne and that he just is kind of a terrible person. Because it sounds like Aemond knew about all of this, right? Aemond knows about everything about Aegon.
Sure.
So he basically understands that he should not be king.
Yeah.
And he sort of just wants to give up on trying to find him.
I wrote down, I thought it was cute again, because he's like trying to convince Kristen. He's like, I read the books and I train and I have a big dragon. You should pick me.
Yeah. That's really funny.
But I get it. He does deserve it. Do you think Aemond
I don't think either of them.
Do you think he would be a good king then?
I think he'd be better than Aegon.
Yeah.
I don't know. So here's the difference. I think Aegon, as we see later, like power goes to his head and he just becomes stupid.
That's
basically,
true.
He just makes stupid decisions, and then I would guess Aemond would be a bit more like ruthless.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, do you want like a stupid king or a ruthless king?
I guess that's true.
And
it's really more the court that decides, right?
The problem is though, is I think neither of them would listen to the court.
That's true.
We see Aegon not listening to that. He literally fires Otto later. This is spoilers, sorry y'all. And I just think Aemond wouldn't listen to any of them either. So I think they're both terrible choices. But I don't know. In my head, I do feel like Aemond would be better because he's not betting on kids fighting,
Yeah, for sure.
So to me, that would...
he's got that going for him.
Right. That's a pretty big... If I was going to be voting for a ruler...
If I had to list the pros and cons.
Right. Putting your own children in the fighting ring kind of goes against you. So
That's true.
That'd be my humble opinion. So then we we cut back to the twins, and Eric is saying basically like, wait a minute, like this is bad news. This guy should not be king. And Ark is like, well, like we're sworn to protect him. We're sworn to their side. We should just do what we're told. And in that sort of fight, I thought they did a good job of this relationship also growing of just kind of being like, well, hey, you know, maybe this is a problem, all the way to later he's like not even helping anymore.
Yeah, no, I think it's developed pretty natural through the episode.
Yeah. It was good.
Did we ever find out, are they like actually twins?
They are actually
okay,
twins.
That
Yeah.
makes sense. That's cool.
The actors. Yeah. So then a random woman comes up to them and she says she knows where Aegon is, but it's going to take the right price and only the hand of the king can come and pay it. And she drops the name, the White Worm.
Mm-hmm.
So we cut to the same lord who was in all black and he's trying to leave. And I thought it was very clear he's very concerned. I thought it was it's just nice. I sometimes feel like we go towards acting of just like very stoic and it's sort of not much like you're just kind of there. And I feel like that acting is always a boring choice. So this guard being like so clearly like trying to hide how he was feeling, I thought was just really good acting and it told the audience what was happening really naturally.
Yeah.
And basically he gets taken from Otto's guards and they're pretty sure he was leaving to go warn Rhaenyra, which I thought that was very brave of him to be trying to do that.
Yeah.
And then Otto has him sent away, which we can presume is him to be killed.
I was thinking about this towards the end of the episode too. We talked about it a little. Rhaenys like breaks in with a dragon. And I just thought like, yeah, you've got to have a lot of like loyalty and confidence to say no to the side that has like dragons. You know what I'm saying? Like that's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, props to him.
Mm-hmm.
Love that. Props to Eric.
Yeah.
Good job.
Well, yeah, Eric. And so then we find out basically Larys is the one who tattled and told Otto he was not good. And Otto sort of calls out that Larys has spent a lot of time with Alicent. And Larys says, well, those hours can benefit you as well. I thought this was kind of odd because later in the episode, he seems pretty team Alicent to me.
Larys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I guess this is just a seed planted for later.
Yeah, I mean, I would believe at this point that Larys is somebody who's just playing whatever side
he wants to play.
Like, as long as he wins at the end, it doesn't really matter to him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think he aligned with Alicent because she was, for lack of better words, just sort of like an easy target at the beginning.
Yeah.
And as he ascends in power, like making those more powerful relationships just makes sense for his character, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
The actor does a great job, by the way. Like he's getting to the point where he's like slimy, and when I see him on screen, I'm like, ugh, and that's like great
in a good way. Yeah,
it's like when you hate to see Cersei, you know. It's just like he's doing.
Well,
a really
I love
good
Cersei, so, but I know what you mean. Yeah. So then, Alicent is in silhouette against this really pretty window, and yeah, this is kind of another example of like, just they use really nice visuals to help make the story more entertaining in this episode. And the Silent Sisters are prepping Viserys' body. And
my goodness.
What?
This threw me so hard when we saw it because like all the shit's already happening. They haven't even wrapped the body yet.
Right.
Like
that crazy.
Is stone cold. That Otto's like, we need to kill Rhaenyra right now. And I'm like, y'all, he's not, you haven't taken him out of bed yet. You killed a man before you wrapped up the king.
Right,
like, that is crazy.
They didn't have any sort of service or anything for him or funeral or like...
And that's tragic. That's so sad.
Well, how do you think Viserys would have wanted his body to be handled? Not this, right?
I mean, yeah, I don't know if he was a burn me with dragonfire kind of person, but I feel like he would have been like, I want my whole family to have dinner. For my funeral, you know, I just want everyone to get along.
It's just extra funny, this like righteousness of, it's sort of they're hiding behind this wall of, well, this is what Viserys wanted.
Yeah,
he wants Aegon to be king, and then they're like, don't even give a shit about his body. He's just not right, like that kind of thing. They're just like, no funerals had, right? They're not thinking about what he would have wanted in his final moments, and so it's really funny to see that juxtaposition.
Yeah.
So then Alicent takes the crown and puts it on Viserys, and she's crying and she's very upset.
Which is nice.
Yeah.
I think in this episode where Otto is becoming sort of a main player, it's good to have those humanizing moments of Alicent.
Yeah, no, I questioned whether Otto even cared that Viserys died, but I'm not questioning at all. Alicent is sad that he's dead.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So then we're with Rhaenys, and Alicent goes to visit her.
Mm-hmm.
And Rhaenys is mad about being locked in, and she she puts it together that Viserys has died, which I thought was cool. I feel like, Rhaenys would put that together. And she also figures out that they're planning to usurp the throne, which I just think they seem to be trying really hard always to make it clear that Rhaenys is the rightful ruler.
Yeah.
And I think this was a great scene for her.
I agree. I think, like you said earlier, the two of them back and forth, we haven't really seen. And it is very, very strong because they're both in really unique places, whether it be like physically or emotionally vulnerable in that moment. And again, I think the staging of their conversation was super fun to look at. The way they would walk to the window and be in silhouette for a second and then sort of like cross each other and do this. We've seen scenes like this in this series that have not been nearly as fun. Yeah.
And I think there wasn't a lot of layers happening to the scene, but I think the acting and the dialogue were strong enough that was okay.
Yeah.
And you were wondering what Rhaenys was going to do and what Alicent was going to do. So Alicent kind of just sort of throws everything that's happened to Rhaenys in her face about her husband being sick and the Rhaenyra's sons not being heirs or true descendants of Rhaenys, right? All these things, she's kind of just throwing it in her face. And Rhaenys seems to double down. She says the words of her house are not fickle. And Alicent says Rhaenys should have been queen. And I thought that was cool because...
Yeah. It's cool and it like affects Rhaenys a lot too.
Yeah. And Alicent says, we do not rule, but we guide the men who do. Which was interesting.
Yeah.
And... it just kind of is left open-ended. Rhaenys basically talks about how, like, do you yourself not want to be queen? And she kind of just almost puts Alicent in her place a little bit. And sort of points out how trapped she is herself. Which is funny considering Rhaenys is the one in the locked room right now.
Yeah, I thought I wrote that down too. Like by the end of the conversation, like Rhaenys still kind of won a little bit, which is just crazy. Again, like such a cool character. Great character interactions.
Yeah, especially because she says the line, you're trying to make a window in the prison. Something about that making a window in the prison that you're in.
Yeah, something you don't want to be free, you want to make a window.
Right, which is really cool because Rhaenys is literally imprisoned in this room trapped, looking out the window. So she's using her own, but the difference is Rhaenys is a dragon and Rhaenys is, right, like Alicent has been so misguided this whole time. It's just really good to see that Alicent could have chosen to be more like Rhaenys and not let people use her as a pawn.
Yeah.
And they foiled each other really well in this scene. And Alicent just leaves.
I think, this was one of the top scenes for me in this episode.
And I think it's clear because a couple scenes later, Otto and Alicent are speaking together. She talks about how she's been a pawn. And I do think this conversation with Rhaenys helped her see that more.
Yeah.
Which is cool that this scene felt like not only was it just an interesting scene, but it had weight to the plot.
Yeah, it mattered.
Right. So then we're back to Criston Cole and Aemond, and Otto is meeting with the White Worm. She knows the king has died because of her network of spies.
Yeah.
And she basically, she wants money, and she gets that, and she wants the fighting rings dealt with, and talks about how the gold cloaks are bribed, and they take the money and they don't do anything about it. And I don't know, this was interesting because it's weird to me that's all she wanted.
Well, it's funny that like her big thing is we need to stop this child fighting. And I'm like, we just found out it exists.
Right,
like,
right.
In all these small council meetings, one person never could have been like, should we talk about the child? And then maybe even Otto's like, yeah, we'll talk about it later, you know?
Yeah.
But I just think it's really funny. And this episode feels sort of isolated in that way. I feel like a lot of things are started and ended in this episode, which again isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like it does tell a story, but like the twins, for example, I feel like I have their whole season arc in this episode. Or like this child rink thing. It works as a story, but planting it a little earlier might have been more impactful.
Yeah, no, I agree because it just, especially because we don't know this character like a huge amount. We know her a little bit, but it's like why personally is she so affected by this fighting ring?
Yeah.
And I don't know. She literally had the heir to the throne.
Yeah, because she doesn't strike me as just this noble person either. Like she runs a spy network, you know?
Yeah, but I like the idea of her caring. I think that adds depth to her character. I don't know. It was
weird. I also maybe focusing on Miss Arya a little more would have been cool. Because we had like one scene, was it the last episode or 2 episodes ago? Where we just
find out the handmaiden is one of Miss Arya's spies.
So she's still kicking around. And it's weird. Like I know they're trying to set her up to be this big character, but we never see her for more than like 10 seconds at a time.
Yeah, so it feels surface level.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because, I don't know, all 4 of them end up finding Aegon at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's odd to me. And then on W Magazine, I read this like review. They were saying they thought a scene of Aegon like stumbling drunk after learning Viserys had died and Miss Arya like using her spies to grab him could have been a cool opening to the episode.
Yeah.
To give us more context of like her power. How would she even get him, right? Things like that.
Just a little more active in the story.
Yeah, and giving us a little bit more of her before.
That seems cool.
Yeah, I thought that might have helped a little bit make this scene feel fuller.
Yeah, because she just sort of pops in these episodes.
Yeah, well, it also doesn't like, I don't think it comes to fruition. I don't think Otto makes good on his word and takes care of the fighting rings.
No.
So like... See what I'm saying?
He says, sure.
He says something
no
literally something
more
like
fighting, I promise.
So whatever. She says something cool. There's no power but what the people will allow you to take.
Mm-hmm.
And she basically implies she could have killed Aegon, but she moved him somewhere safe.
Yeah.
So then we get to the twins find Aegon in, I guess it's a sept?
Yes.
Okay.
They're somewhere.
He's like underneath the like table of candles and like hiding in the like stone, I don't know, altar even maybe you could call it. And he's drunk and tries to run away from them, which is kind of funny to me.
Very funny. And
Kristen Cole and Aemond are right there with him.
Yeah, this was my favorite sound cue of the episode. They're walking to the outside with the stairs, which is a great set. And the fight that's about to happen is very interesting and very fun because of those stair steps. But Aemon's like hiding almost, and he pops up, and literally it's like the most generic like happening as he like arises from a hidden. And I thought that was so funny because of course it's all black eye patch guy rising from the shadows. It was just very funny to watch.
Eric sees that even more so. Aegon looks like a toddler right now. Like even more so, he should not be ruling, to the point where this is where Eric just like literally take a step back and like does not help at all.
Yeah.
So Aemond runs after Aegon. Kristen Cole takes on Sir Auric. And the other one's just like watching. The shots of this were really interesting. Like you said, the steps made it cool. And like Aemond and Aegon are like fighting, but also like fighting with their words. And like he's like, is father really dead? And they're gonna make you king. And he like spits in his face. And it's just like he's still like trying to run away. And he's talking about how he doesn't want to rule. Just it's fun to see them like physically fighting and then like also fighting with their words as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Anything else about this scene?
I don't know. Yeah, I like the idea. I'm thinking another thing pacing wise. I wonder if this could have happened earlier. Like I like all the things that happened, but if we could have condensed it. Because what I would really like is more time of Aegon dealing with what's happening, right? Because he's the butt of a lot of jokes in this episode, and like Alicent is sort of leading him to do these things. But by the end, like you can tell he's affected by this choice, right? Whether it be good or bad or somewhere in between.
Or what the people think of him and what his family thinks of him.
I would have liked a little more time to see how this is impacting him. Because we sort of get him and then he becomes the king. And we'll get a carriage scene later on where he does like open up a little bit. But in that scene, I was like, oh, I wish I could have seen more of this to really see like where his head is at, because he becomes such a such a powerful player. Like he's the king. He can do whatever he wants, and his choices could be justified very much by how he acts in this episode, but he spends a lot of it unconscious.
Or just not on screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think their goal was to make the whole episode about this chase for Aegon, which is cool, but in the chase, we only learned 2 things. I guess 3, but one of those does. So we learned that he goes to brothels, which, considering how just like sexual this character has been in the past, that is no surprise to me, nor does that, in my mind, feel like that makes him not be king.
Yeah.
I don't feel like, as an audience member, maybe like in this world that's different, but like as an audience member, like a king who visits brothels, I'm not like, oh no, they can't rule because they have sex, right?
Well, and that's, I mean, it is beyond common that's just kind of what kings do. Like, they can do whatever they want. They're the king.
Exactly. So that doesn't do anything for me. We find out he has bastards, which, like, yeah, that's not great, but like, I don't know. He's definitely not the only one, the only king, right? And then
he may be the only king selling his children to the fighting rings.
That's the big one. That's the big one. But like, that's all we learned. And if you're hinging the whole episode on this race for him, where we have these clues and we find out more and more about him, we only learned one thing. So I don't think we needed to either learn more, or it needed to not be about this race for him. It needed to be a portion of it.
Yeah. Well, and it's just all the plot points are there, but I just don't think it reads very well. Like what we were saying earlier, you're looking for all these clues and it's a dead end, and then the villain reveals itself, like the White Worm's like, oh, I know where Aegon is, but you need to do something for me. And Otto's just like, okay, crosses fingers and never does anything. And it's just the stakes aren't really there. Like, what's gonna happen? They're not gonna find Aegon. He's dead.
Right.
No, right?
Right. Yeah, I agree.
So I don't know. I can see the idea of the chase, but I feel like making the chase like 20 minutes long and then focusing on the other stuff maybe would have provided more. Because if you're going to talk about thrillers, like, I don't know, think of like a good courtroom scene. Nobody's chasing each other. It's all like the dialogue and how people have different dirt on each other. And that's what Game of Thrones is, you know?
Or there's usually like a big reveal with a thriller. And there was no reveal.
Yeah.
Not to like keep bringing it back to this thriller thing, but I do see that was what they were going for now with this chase and things like that. And I just don't think it worked. So then Alicent goes to Otto, knowing that like she has Aegon now, and he's like, well played. And she's basically like, I'm not playing a game, right?
Yeah.
And I thought this was a really cool moment. He's kind of like, we were together on this. And she says our hearts were never one. She talks about how she was a piece to be played on the board. Which, yeah, that's very, very true. And very clear to everyone watching that Otto has always manipulated Alicent. And he basically is like, well, I made you queen, right? Then you liked being that piece of the board. You got to be queen.
Yeah.
And she says, I think this was like the big thing. She says basically that I didn't know what I wanted because I always just wanted what you wanted for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool because it's like, when you think back to times we've seen her, like, I would not say Alicent is a happy person. Right? And I wouldn't have said she was a happy person like when she was younger either.
No, for sure. Picking her fingers and things like that.
Right. And then even after that, when she was married to him and like she lost her only friend, her like best friend for that. And like she's married to this like, yes, she loves him, but like she's not like attracted to him, right?
Yes.
And I guess that's like probably the norm for a lot of women in this world anyways, but like I would not say that she was happy.
I agree. Yeah.
So I just thought that was cool. And then he literally calls her squeamish. She says being reluctant to murder people is not a weakness. And I thought that was cool because that is very much sort of like the plight of being a woman, is like this being told that your emotional intelligence makes you weak, when it actually is just like the man's lack of emotional intelligence or the man's lack of like empathy and sympathy. So that was cool. And she's saying she's not a weakness. And he says, everyone knows that you have to sacrifice the few to save the many. And it's kind of cool because it's like, well, who's right here?
Well, and he said that a couple times too. So it's very like cementing he does have a moral compass, but it is his and it is unbreaking, you know?
And I think he believes that.
Yeah.
I think he does believe this is the right choice and he's going to really stick by it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then Alicent just lays it down how it's going to be and that they're going to bring the Targaryens back to greatness and the whole realm's going to see. And the biggest thing about this speech was that Rhaenyra is going to be spared on honorable terms. And she says, like, this is what my husband would have wanted. And he's like, your husband or you? Which it's like, her husband.
Yeah, I thought that show was like, it is his daughter.
His quote, Viserys said, my only child.
My only child.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
I'm like, okay, Otto. So I thought that was silly.
I thought it was silly. But I like that this is the first scene where Alicent fully is like, this is what we're doing. Like, I'm in control. And I also really liked the dialogue was noticeably more plain than normal. A lot of characters, especially these two, I feel are using heightened language a lot to like hide intentions and do things like that, which is very cool, very Game of Thrones. But when they're sort of confronting each other about Alicent sort of being led, I think it's very cool that she forces the conversation on a simpler level.
Well, yeah, it's sort of like because he starts it by saying well played, right?
Exactly.
And she basically says we're not playing. So like the facade is down.
Yeah.
The mask is off. We are being our true selves now.
You know, which I think is cool. Like it was a noticeable writing variation that I thought played really well.
That's such a smart realization. That's so true. That's really good storytelling when the language can just the like choice of language can further to tell you who the characters are and what they're feeling in that moment. That's really cool. Yeah. Very cool.
And then we end, she leaves and Otto just says, as you wish. And that like really solidified. That was a cool moment for me.
Well, before that, he ends it by saying she looks so much like her mother in certain lights.
Yeah.
I'm like, what does that mean?
Weirdo.
I know.
Straight up weirdo.
I mean, maybe he's impressed by her or something
I think so, but that's just, I feel like it's another power trippy thing to say.
I thought it was cool because I don't know if Alicent was going to usurp. Well, I guess she was. Was she like independent of Otto and the small council? Was Alicent's plan after she'd heard what Viserys said, was she going to put Aegon on the throne?
I think in her mind, she was going to talk to Rhaenyra and explain what happened. And Rhaenyra was going to say, that makes sense. And everything's going to be fine. Because I firmly believe, if anything, the last episode showed me that Alicent had a change of heart. Like, Alicent wants to be friends with Rhaenyra, wants to be connected, is okay with the succession, you know? So I think in her mind, it was going to work out in a way where everybody was happy. Because if he hadn't have said that, I feel like Alicent would have been like, yes, Rhaenyra's queen.
Right. No, 100%.
So I do feel like in this moment, she is doing this for Viserys, not for herself, not for her son. Because at this point, I feel like it's, I don't think Alicent really likes Aegon that much, you know? Right. So I don't know if she would be championing for him alone.
Yeah.
So I think it's cool because she is like, she's doing an impossible task, right? And the only people on her side are like, yes, we need to kill everyone else.
So I'm just saying that because I think that in like, I don't know, what was it? Episode 3, 4? When Rhaenyra basically tells Viserys, hey, you got to fire Otto. He's bad. He's bad news. She was so right for doing that. So justified. And I think this really, really makes that clear. Because, I don't think this would have turned out this way, specifically not been there.
For sure. There definitely wouldn't be as established of a coup happening in this moment.
I don't even know if it would have been, there would have been one like this.
Who's going to do it? The Lannister? No.
Right. Because I'm sure Otto was the one who was pulling the strings.
For sure.
So then Alicent walks over to Larys and he kind of starts speaking with her about how, like, do you want to know how Otto found Aegon first? And it's like, she takes her shoes off, right? And puts her like her socks on her feet in socks on the table. And so he tells her about the spies and how her handmaiden is a spy. And then
which has this been established, this like sexual favor exchange for knowledge thing?
No, never.
Interesting. Because I believe it. Like, I think this is a fun dynamic to introduce. But
well,
it does.
I think it goes back to like what the story. I don't know how I feel about the whole thing, but this is like the pros for it. I'll say, is that women in this world are treated so much differently, and this would not be happening if she were a man. And so this, to me, really goes back to this patriarchy of like women have to play the game different.
Yeah.
And this is her having to play the game different.
For sure.
And I think when the crux of the story is these two women against each other and how the men influence them and made things different for them, right? And how all about now putting a woman on the throne. I think this does help with that. This does add to that theme of the story. I don't know how I feel about it though.
I think it works. I'm wondering if they had scenes earlier where it was established more, you know?
Not even
because I feel like there was a switch where, because Larys did approach Alicent as like a friend, right? And yeah, like the burning of Harrenhal soured that a little bit. But the last couple times we've seen the two interact, Alicent's like a little bit more just like ugh about him.
Yeah.
And revealing this, I like understand that, right?
Right.
So I feel like this has been happening for some amount of time, right? They don't need to discuss what's happening, right? Like this has happened before.
She knows what she's got to do to get the information.
Exactly. So this sort of just cropped up this episode where I feel like maybe even alluding to it a little more would have made it more like, what's going on, you know?
Yeah, something very small.
But I get it. I do like that it shows, even as the queen, Alicent needs to do these things to like get what she wants.
And that's what I mean about like women in this world.
And I think it's a cool character thing for Larys too. Not to like kink shame or anything like that, but he's specifically like interested in her feet, which like brings to mind visuals of like groveling, which I feel like he is a very like bottom floor sort of person, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which I think is neat. Like I think it's motivated enough to not be like a Nickelodeon scandal, you know?
Right. Well, so then she like takes her socks off and gets more information. And basically he says like, he's going to take care of it is what, and in doing so, she like turns away and lets him like jerk off to her feet.
Yeah.
And I will say I did like that it was like, it could have been like grittier and gorier. So I didn't, especially because like, she's being assaulted and taken advantage of
for sure
in a way, right? And like it's like a very disgusting thing, regardless of like any part of her body, this having to happen. It is absolutely atrocious.
Yeah.
And so like I like that they sort of like took a step back, and I would probably venture to say that's because a woman directed it. I would put a guess to that, like that's why it was. Because watching it, you knew how uncomfortable she was. I didn't need more to know that. So I thought that was nice. I want to say something kind of funny. So on IMDb, the plot keywords sorted by relevance for this whole episode.
Okay.
Number 1, foot fetish. Number 2, pervert. Number 3, brother-brother relationship. That's a good one. That's a good one.
Wait, what are these? These are search terms?
It's like plot keywords on IMDb for the episode.
Oh, good.
Punishment, prison, scolding. This one, rear nudity. Right? Like, what are these? I don't know. It was just so funny to me that like out of the whole episode, the first 2.
Yeah.
That is so, it just made me laugh. Stuck with people. I didn't remember this, to be honest.
Oh, I did. Well, that's why it was weird, because I remember the last couple episodes, I was like, when is the feet stuff happening? Not that I was looking forward to it, but you know, I remember that very vividly. So I was like, it's weird. And I'm like, we're on the second to last episode. Yeah. I'm like, it's just now happening. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's true. So then we move on to, it was kind of funny. It was like dramatic. It was just like these shots of kind of like each person thinking, and like, I thought it was very dramatic.
Which I think actually played well in this season, where we've had a lot of shots of people just looking and it doesn't play well. I feel like this is the best we've gotten. Yeah. Because I could infer what somebody was thinking. Yeah. And get pretty close, I feel.
I think so too. No, I agree. It was over dramatic, but I think if you do something over dramatic right, it's strong. Like,
yeah,
I enjoyed it.
There's fucking dragons, like
right.
You know?
It's exactly, it's a fantasy series. Like we don't be realistic. So then it ends with Rhaenys and one of the twins walks in, which it is twin Eric walks in, and he's there.
Who is on Team Black side?
Yes.
Okay.
And he's there to free Rhaenys.
Yes.
We passed the lord that Otto took, and he's hanging.
I thought that was super cool.
Yeah, because we didn't need any more. We knew from that, like, what happened to his story.
I like that it was inside too.
Me too.
That's crazy.
And it's probably just to serve as a warning for like the other lords.
Yeah, sure.
And it's cool because if you look at like that story, that man had a full beginning, middle, and end to his story, and that's just always fun, right? It feels tied up, and like the episode was fully ended and a bow was tied. Yeah. They passed the skull of Balerion. I guess they're using passages because Rhaenys. Well, they are. We know it's the same path that Daemon and Rhaenyra took.
Yeah.
Because we see them on that like ledge with the steps, and Rhaenys doesn't know where they are, which it's just cool. And they passed this house on fire. Did you know what this was?
No.
I know what it is now because I Googled it.
Okay, what is it?
On Reddit, actually. I looked it up on Reddit.
Okay, yes. We love Reddit.
I think that was Larys, and he's burning the white worm.
For
Alicent.
Okay.
That's what the house burning was. I didn't get that.
No.
I think a lot of people didn't from what it looks like.
Okay.
I think maybe they could have showed
Larys. Right?
Because they showed a figure, but like we thought maybe it was the Otto taking care of the fighting rings, for a second.
Yeah. Well, I have no idea what was going on. That would have been nice to see like Larys, and then he clocks that Eric is there, and then that's like more information for him,
Well, because I think we see Miss Arya later on being like, she's lost it all, so I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wish it was clear.
Yeah, no, that never even crossed my mind.
I don't think it would have been hard to get, just like a little bit to make it clear.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Oh, well.
So then Rhaenys is in actually like the city area with the twin, and she wants her dragon, and they're saying no. But now a bunch of knights are there pushing all of the citizens of the people of the city. Yeah, they're pushing them towards like the Red Keep, basically the dragon. I think it's the dragon pit where it ends up happening
for the coronation, which we've established. Otto's like, everybody needs to see Aegon be crowned, so everybody knows he's the king.
Alicent says it too, even.
And this starts a lot of what I wish this show could have done a lot more of, which is like seeing the world from like the peasants of King's Landing perspective. Because it is just so interesting to me that we are so tied up in these characters' lives. And honestly, they don't really give a shit.
No.
Like, we're witnessing this big coup happen where people are being overthrown and murdered. And Otto's just like, the new king is Aegon. And everyone's like, fuck yeah, let's go.
Okay, yeah.
And I feel like that's such an interesting perspective that we got to see a little bit in Game of Thrones. But I think in any fantasy about like high noble people, just a glimpse of the world from a commoner is just a really fun perspective to go off of.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's also a really cool way to get information, right? Because we know all these intricate relationships, and then somebody says something that's so obvious, but because it's not needing to be hidden from anybody else who's powerful, it's just so fun,
Yeah. It was also cool because we had Rhaenys there, so we did have a perspective to follow.
Yeah.
But yeah, the people don't really care who's king for the most part. But it was also fun to see that these people were just like ushering them like cattle.
Yeah.
Like terrible. They're being like pushed, and
you had people like holding babies and had carts and things, and they were just shoved into this space. It's crazy.
So then we get the carriage scene with Alicent and Aegon. I really liked this scene, and I feel like the actor who plays Aegon has not had a chance to act yet. Really?
This is the scene that made me write down, I wish there were more of this in this episode.
Yes, because he was phenomenal. And his character to me is such a fascinating one. This idea of like, I don't want to be king. That is so rare. Yeah. I mean, I guess Viserys, but not in the same way.
Yeah, it's fun because he doesn't want to be king for a selfish reason.
Yeah.
Like, because he does not want to be king. He would not be a good king.
And he knows it.
He's just a rich guy.
Yeah.
Which is very fun. And he's a little crazy. Like, he's a little messed up, which is very exciting.
Yeah, no. And Aegon's upset, and he basically is like, Viserys didn't want me to be king. And Alicent is insisting that he did. And Aegon says, I think what everyone is thinking, if he wanted me to be king, he could have decreed that time and time again.
Yeah.
He's had my whole life to do that. And he never did it. And at one point, he even like laughs at the idea. And he says that he didn't even like him, that Viserys doesn't even like him.
Yeah.
And then Alicent gives him the dagger, the prophecy dagger, which neither of them know it's a prophecy dagger.
I wrote that down too. I was like, oh my God, nobody knows.
Well, yeah, so that's the thing. After the dance, I think it's pretty clear that
lost.
the prophecy's lost until Rhaegar, I think. At least a little bit.
That's cool.
It is really, really freaking cool. So then, she gives him the dagger. And he's just like kind of staring at it. This was again a good way to visually tell the story. He's staring at this dagger and not listening while Alicent is trying to like convince him to be a good king. The whole crux of this episode was that it was like, if I get Aegon first, I get to dictate how he rules and how he handles the situation.
Yeah.
So this is her moment to explain, don't be cruel. You're going to be good to Rhaenyra. You're not going to blah, blah, blah. And he's just staring at this dagger. Or barely even listening to her. Really cool to me. I thought that was really, again, just kind of like showed one, like this idea of becoming king is like seeping in a little bit more. It's making a little bit more sense to him, but for the wrong reasons. And he's not, as we know later, Alicent is absolutely pushed to the wayside. Like she does not become, she's not in charge later on because people don't listen to her anymore. The men won't listen to her. And this was like the first moment of that. First little hint that like Aegon's not going to let you.
Yeah. Well, even earlier, I think the small council meeting where they were planning this coup without her. It's like,
that's a pretty big one. Yeah.
You know?
I just meant from like Aegon's perspective at least.
I agree.
And then Aegon interrupts her and says, do you love me? I thought that was such good writing.
Yeah. I remember laughing because I was like, that's so good.
Right.
And it's, again, this big idea of this, who's going to take the throne, this epic fantasy. And it all comes down to everybody just wants their parent to love them.
Right.
You know, like that's what this whole thing is all about.
And I wish they would play that up more because I think with this idea of like the generations and taking on your parents' beliefs, this idea of like, why am I taking on those beliefs?
Yeah.
To have their approval is just interesting. I think they could have tied that thread together more. They do it here. I just think more instances. Because then she says, you imbecile. Which I think the delivery was phenomenal because to me, she was saying like, obviously I do. But like, just tell him you love him.
I know. Well, yeah, it's a mix of like, this is not the time. Like, you need to be king, you know?
I don't know. I feel like it was so, to me, Aegon is trying to figure out what to do and how to do it and things like that. And that is going to depend on her answer. Yeah. And I'm like, can you just not give him anything, Alicent? Like, I don't know. You see what I'm saying? It's like maybe he wouldn't have a kids fighting ring. Yeah. You just told him you loved him. You know what I mean?
That's all it would take.
That's really just maybe for the sake of those kids.
Just do it for the children.
Do it for the children, Alicent. All you have to say is you love him.
Please. Oh, that's funny.
But I thought that was great writing because it's like ambiguous and you don't know where it's going to go and it seems
this
purposeful.
Scene was great. Yeah, would love to explore Aegon a little bit more. And I do, looking back on it, there's a lot of choices in this episode made specifically for feelings. Like Aegon, how he's dealing with everything. Two brothers are sort of like, they're loyal to their houses, but Eric wants to change sides because Aegon's awful, you know? Right. And that's very cool to me.
Well, then add on to it, Alicent wanting to spare Rhaenyra. Yeah. Because of our friendship. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very good. I think so too. So then it's sort of like, again, it's just this big kind of chaotic moment from all the people. The bells are tolling. Yeah. Rhaenys is watching. And Otto starts the coronation and he's announcing that Viserys has died and Aegon will be king. I thought this was cool because all the times that I watch people speaking to crowds in this and Game of Thrones, I'm like, how do they hear them?
I wrote that down too.
Like,
and I
how do they
actually
hear
had
them?
something to say about this. So a lot of the time it's somebody like super powerful, like Dany's talking to a city or
An
something
entire
like that.
group of Unsullied.
And they're barely even talking really. They're like, listen up. And I don't know if this is on purpose or if they were trying to be more like realistic, but Otto had to actually yell.
Yeah.
And to me, that put in the idea that like he's not as powerful as these other truly powerful people are, right? Because he's pulling a lot of strings, but it's behind the scenes. It's not in the same like,
oh, he's very much a backseat driver.
you know?
Yeah.
And I thought that was really neat. And again, I don't know if it's on purpose. I might be reading too much into this, but something I distinctly remember about Game of Thrones is that nobody who has something to say ever really yells.
Yeah.
And he's having to shout over this crowd. And that just reads to me like it's false in some way, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. I just liked it because to me it just felt more realistic, but that I agree, that's really cool.
Gotcha. And it could just be that. I could just be like way too like, well, actually about it.
But I think it's fun. So then he claims that Viserys wished for Aegon to succeed him, and the people are kind of like, all right, but okay.
Like,
and they clap.
Yeah.
And the knights start trumpeting and they're walking in and they create this like tunnel of swords for Aegon. And he just looks like so tentative and distraught. He looks like a little kid.
Honestly.
In like the best way.
Yeah. I don't know how much of it is CG, but I'm sure a fair amount of it is like extras in the crowd and everything. And it's so fun to see this just little person at this point. Like Aegon's not very big in this sea of extras that they cast. Like the framing, just everything looked really cool about everything happening in this scene. Like all
him being in all black even. He's like almost crying.
Yeah, it's really
like
good.
very grand, but it does not feel like he wants this at all.
Yeah.
And even when he's like ascending the steps, the knights in the background are like putting their their swords down and like sheathing them, and it's just this really cool visual.
Yeah.
Watching him as they're in the background. Rhaenys takes this opportunity to leave, which I thought was smart.
Sneak off.
Yeah, she's gonna sneak off
to the dragon pit.
And they start sort of like anointing Aegon, which they were using like the gods of the seven, right?
Yes.
Which I'm like, the Targaryens, do they worship the gods of the seven?
So the Targaryens, from what I remember, when Aegon the Conqueror came over, no. But Aegon made a big deal to basically have freedom of religion. So like the Sept was allowed to do their thing. Anytime he would he wanted to be officially anointed by like the religion of Westeros. So I feel like some of them probably were anointed in that way. Like I think it's a tradition to like keep the peace basically, but I don't think it's like a Targaryen thing. Like it means something to the realm, but not really to them. Okay,
that's just what I was wondering. I'm wondering if it was an Alicent
I do
thing.
think it means more because of Alicent now, though, right? And I feel like this really starts the trajectory of the Sept in the religion like having more power.
So then Kristen Cole crowns Aegon himself.
Which that one I was like, is that usually how it happens? Because he's the King's Guard at this point. He's like the commander of the King's Guard.
Lord Commander. Yeah.
But I don't know if that's how that works.
I don't know. Because like the main protector, I could see it making sense.
I don't know.
But Aemond is like watching.
Yeah.
And I think it was cool. They do that a lot.
Helena's watching too, and she does not look happy either.
No. She probably sees the future.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's good.
This is funny to me, but in a good way. Aegon is like turned around and he's just kind of like watching his family awkwardly bow.
Yeah.
And you see him like slowly be like, wait, I kind of like this.
Yeah. He's got like the OG Aegon like conqueror crown on. Like he has black fire. And then he looks to the crowd and he's like, it is me. Yes. And he like hits a Jesus pose at the end. I'm like, let's go.
He so does. Yeah. And then he like, because the people are cheering and clapping, he slowly starts to realize he likes this and he starts like thrusting black fire in the air. And I thought it was cool to start this, not necessarily this scene, but the ending the last time we saw Aegon with "Do you love me?"
Well, yeah.
To this answer of they love me, right? And it was just nice. It was a really, really good storytelling device of what he wants is love, and he's seeing himself get it, which it's not real.
All the superficial praise,
right? It's not real,
which is awesome.
it totally informs the audience why he is this. I mean, I feel like a lot of people would love this, right? Like a whole crowd cheering for you. Like you're going to be, but you see him really like, okay, I can get down with being king. I've changed my mind.
Yeah.
And this actor does a phenomenal job. There's no words. And I see it's not just like an all of a sudden spark. It's like this slow, like, especially because the family's just like tilting their heads a little. It's like the tiniest bows. It's like so awkward.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because he looks over at Aemond, who also just desperately needs someone to love him. And then he sees his brother win the praise of the entirety of King's Landing. And you're like, oh, that sucks.
Poor little second son. And they're playing this like ominous but triumphant music. And Otto looks just so happy. And then all of a sudden, Rhaenys storms in with Meleys.
Yes.
And I liked the design for Meleys. Her dragon.
I think she looked great. I wrote down, then Rhaenys breaks in and kills a lot of people.
Yeah, that's the thing. She killed a lot of people, but no one that was her enemy.
No one. Not a single person.
Not a single enemy. Just a bunch of innocents.
I didn't expect her to I kept thinking, like, how crazy would it be if she just, like, torched everybody?
Right.
Like, just got rid of Team Green right now.
Right.
That'd be crazy. But, you know, you don't expect her to kill any key players at this point. Like, I'm not expecting her to do that. But to ram a dragon in, killing at least like probably maybe 100 people, right?
Okay.
And then they have to run in terror past that same dragon.
Well, then you think about it also, probably like what's it called when the crowd gets so
like
hyped
trample
up?
deaths?
Yeah, like stampeding. That's a real thing.
Absolutely. So whatever point she proved, the commoners got it, you know?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. This is not going to be a win for Team Black on King's Landing.
I was about to say, this is not what we're going for, right? I love you, but
and then, well, because especially, I think their point was like, well, in what I think they were going for with the reason why Rhaenys did not just like utterly obliterate them with Dragonfire in that moment was like, okay, she is the true queen, so she's going to make the good decision and not just like kill these people because that wouldn't be good. But like she killed a bunch of people from what do you mean? Yeah. Like that's not good either.
I don't know, because they say in the after episode they want her to have this like triumphant moment, which that is very in character for her, right? I get it. I just don't know what she could have done. You know, like maybe she just gets Bailey's and leaves and everybody sees her leave and they're like, oh shit, now Rhaenyra's gonna know. Or like maybe instead of Eric breaking her out, which I get Eric needs his moment to be like, I'm Team Black as well, but maybe she could have like escaped herself. Like she kept opening the window. I figured she was just gonna like bed sheet and climb out the window at some point.
That would have been cool.
Cause it just, like her going there, murdering innocent people and then being like, bye, just really doesn't read to me.
It doesn't read to me either.
And that adds a lot to the because that's the last thing that happens. She like flies away and then the episode's over and you're like, why? You know?
Well, because it also like lingers for a long time. The dragon roars very loudly and
the dragon looked like it was ready to torch the people.
Yes. And I don't know. Yeah, I think the point was to try to have some big final moment for not only the episode, but the penultimate episode, right? And I get that. I just don't think this was it.
I didn't believe anybody was going to get hurt.
Like, she could have destroyed something. I don't know what, but she could have destroyed something. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like
or even I'm thinking like, based on where they had it, because I guess she came from underneath, right?
Right.
If she could have maybe not flown through, but like climbed up, maybe it wouldn't hurt anybody. But like, it's terrifying because there's a dragon in the room now. Like there's a dragon inside.
Well,
and maybe we see Aegon get terrified and he like drops Blackfire. And that's a big hit for Team Green. Because now like everybody thinks that King's a coward or something like that, you know?
That's a good idea. That's a really good idea. Because at least she had some sort of one-upping. And I also wish they would have let her feel like it would have felt more like a power struggle and not like is she going to kill him? Is she going to kill them? And instead it's more like I can kill you. And I'm choosing not to.
Because she has won every scene she's been a part of. And this did not feel like a win to me.
No.
Because she never wins by, she is like Baratheon, but she doesn't win by like bashing her enemy's head in. Like she always one-ups them mentally.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it would have been cool to see that she can do both. Now, like, she is the rightful queen.
But then have her like say something.
Yeah.
You know, like have her fly in.
Does she say something to King's Landing then? Because early in season 2, they are trying to get the people on their side.
Yeah.
So maybe they could have set that up here where she's like, people of King's Landing, he is not your king, right? Like that kind of thing or something. I don't know. With like good rhetoric, and she actually does kind of sway them, and she's like, looks all powerful and cool on her dragon. And they're like, yeah, wait a minute, you know? And so now the people are not on their side or something.
Yeah.
That could have been some sort of, that mattered.
Yeah, or I mean, even like if you want to really be dramatic about it, like penultimate episode, she's on the dragon, she gets off the dragon, goes up, like slaps Aegon or something, and everyone's like going to attack, and then the dragon's there, right?
Right.
Like just something to prove that like she is always going to be above this, right?
Yeah.
Like her letting go of wanting to be queen. I feel like Rhaenys is the person, right? Like there's whole wars going on. She's still above it to me, you know? Like she picks a side, she's still above it.
Right.
So yeah, it feels very weird because they said specifically this scene was to give her this triumphant ending of a season, and I feel like it completely undermines what they've been building.
Especially because the scene before with her, not like her walking and being in the crowd, but the scene where we really got her last with
where
Alicent.
She destroys Alicent, yeah.
Absolutely. So like to me, that was incredibly triumphant. So I think it was cool. I like that we got to see her dragon.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially because like her dragon's important, and I don't know. I just think that this was a big miss.
It's awkward. It's really awkward.
Really awkward. They're just kind of like staring. And like Alicent is like, get Helena, and like shields Aegon, but like
which I also thought was hilarious, right? After being like, you're so stupid, Aegon. She's like, is Helena okay?
Yeah. And it's like she shields Aegon, but they just kind of stand there, and also you're both dead.
Yeah.
It is
absolutely
dragon fire. You are both dead. It does not matter.
And I think you get the scene of her like closing her eyes, like realizing it, but then it's like, what is I don't really feel anything.
Well, exactly. I wasn't worried.
Yeah. So weird ending of the episode. Cool. Loved seeing the dragon.
But it fell flat.
But it was weird.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I wanted something amazing for the character they created.
Yeah. Because she deserves it.
Yeah.
Like
they're right. She does deserve a great ending, but this was not it.
No.
Something interesting is Rhaenyra was literally not in this episode at all.
That's true.
Which I think was cool.
Yeah, Rhaenyra, Daemon. It is called the Green Council.
Yeah, so. And then next episode is like it's called like Team Black or something.
Oh, really?
So,
that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know. Overall, it was like a nice episode, but I don't feel like it was a penultimate episode.
That's what I say. Yeah, pretty good. I think it went by kind of fast.
In a good way.
Yeah. So the pacing wasn't bad. I think in terms of what they were trying to do, the pacing was weird, but as an episode overall, it was not bad. Yeah, a lot of things happening, which didn't, again, like kind of surface level. Again, not really bad. A lot of like actual just events had to happen this episode.
Well,
you know?
I think that because last week's episode was so filled with character moments and like depth and plot, it was okay that we took a break for this one. And it was basically like, it felt kind of like, we do not have time for games. We do not have time to be like, not just immediately telling everyone the truth.
Yeah.
And that I think is part of why it worked. And in the past, it hasn't done that. There's never been a reason for why we're just like saying what we mean in the past.
Yeah. And I do think they find some time. They sprinkle in some good character moments. I do think the music this episode was very well done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let me end on our quote. This is kind of a long one, and this is between the scene between Alicent and Rhaenys. It's a freaking good one. So basically that Rhaenys says, "You're wiser than I believed you to be, Alicent Hightower." And Alicent says, "A true queen counts the cost to her people." And Rhaenys goes, and this is my official quote, she goes, "And yet you toil still in service to men. Your father, your husband, your son. You desire not to be free, but to make a window in the wall of your prison. Have you never imagined yourself on the Iron Throne?" And that was the like mic drop moment for her character.
For sure. That was her winning scene of the episode.
And it literally changed Alicent's opinion.
Yeah. It's great.
It was really good.
It was really strong. Love Rhaenys. Favorite character, probably.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
So far, anyway.
Yeah. There's some good characters.
There are. Well,
okay.
Well, thanks so much for listening. Join us next time as we talk about the final episode of Season 1 of House of the Dragon. Are you excited?
I'm really excited.
we're super excited. One season done in the books for Welcome to the Writers' Room. If you've been enjoying the episodes, interact however you can on however you're listening. A like, comment, follow, review. All of it helps to get these episodes heard and listened to by more people, which is so helpful to us. We thank you very much.
And we also love to hear other people's opinions. Whether you think we're right or wrong, we still want to hear it, because that's what this is about.
Yeah, we've had so many cool discussions about the last couple episodes on TikTok, on Instagram, in the YouTube comments, and it is so fun to just talk creative with creative people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I'm Alex.
I'm Madison.
And this has been
Welcome to the Writers' Room.
See you next time.